James Murdoch, Rupert's younger son, was boasting that he hasn't had, it's become a kind of power trip for billionaire kids. I haven't had a haircut since March, says James Murdoch. Well, that's great for you. If you're the lady who owns the hair salon, and you make your living from giving pampered billionaires like James Murdoch their haircut, that's not such an obviously virtuous thing. This is the weirdest year, one of the weirdest years in human history.
Have you been surprised, Mark, by that reaction, the idea that we have been willing to give up our freedoms so easily? Is it because we have assumed the rule of law was an abstraction, democracy was an abstraction, the idea that the police wouldn't come barging in to someone's home and arrest, as you said, Zoe Bueller, a pregnant mother in front of her children, because they have been monitoring her Facebook page and she said she supports a protest against what's happening? Are you surprised by what's occurred, not just in Victoria and in Australia, but around the Western world?
Well, you use the word democracy there, and democracy, is a word I value. But if democracy just means that every 4 or 5 years you get to mark an X on a ballot paper as to your choice of tormentor, then democracy is insufficient consolation for what's going on. It's quite possible to see in the next Victorian election that you might have a choice between a party that lets you go 5 kilometres from your house and a party that lets you go 9 kilometres from your house. Well, in the end, democracy is not much consolation if that's what it boils down to. I mean, for example, no one thinks colonial Hong Kong was any kind of democracy, but it was a freer society than ours. And likewise, London during the plague of 1665 was, they didn't elect representatives, they didn't talk about democracy or elections, but they had as a practical matter more daily freedom than we now do. And that's actually quite a serious point. And to me, I think more and more, particularly at the height of full lockdown over here in late spring, when the 2 weeks to flatten the curve had turned into 2 months and 3 months and 4 months. And I remembered being taught at school A.J.P. Taylor's famous observation that until August 1914, the average Englishman had no contact with the state until, except with his postmistress and the village constable. And that changed in August 1914 with the Great War, when the state took on extraordinary powers. And it never quite relinquished those powers after the war. So we came to accept in the course of the 20th century that really quite minor piffling bureaucrats had power over us in all sorts of minor, tedious ways. And I think, in a sense, we're completing that transformation that began a century ago during the Great War, where people now think it is the normal state of affairs